I'm Lieutenant Commander Arden Vale, 31 years old, and I earned the call sign Phantom 6 after saving a SEAL team from an ambush in Yemen, 6 men who lived because I rerouted their comms in 90 seconds. For years, I gave everything to the mission, my sleep, my sanity, my loyalty, and believed the people I served beside respected that. But when I came home and one of those same SEALs laughed at my dog tags in a bar, daring me to name my call sign, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been underestimated or disrespected by someone who should have known better? If you have, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand your ground after being dismissed or humiliated, hit like and subscribe for more true stories about setting boundaries and reclaiming your worth. Because what happened next might surprise you. People always assume you need to be loud to be heard. They're wrong. I learned that lesson early, growing up in Annapolis, watching my father come home from submarine duty with that particular kind of silence that comes from spending months underwater. My mother, a Coast Guard surgeon, taught me something different. Precision matters more than volume. She'd stitch a wound with barely a word, save a life before breakfast, then ask if anyone wanted toast. That's the kind of competence I understood. The kind that doesn't announce itself. I joined ROTC at 17, not because I needed to prove anything, but because it felt like coming home. While other midshipmen were trying to out each other in formation, I was studying signal intelligence, learning how satellites talked to submarines, how data moved through hostile territory. Cyber intelligence became my language. Tactical data fusion became my art. I wasn't the loudest voice in any room. I was the one making sure the right information reached the right people before someone died because of bad intel. Yemen changed everything. I was 26, freshly minted as a lieutenant in naval intelligence, assigned to support SEAL operations and counterinsurgency work. They didn't want me there at first. Intel officers were supposed to stay in air-conditioned rooms, pushing reports up the chain. But the field commander, a man named Cashin Rourke, had different ideas. He wanted intelligence officers who understood that data wasn't just numbers, it was the difference between a successful extraction and 6 body bags. I spent 9 months embedded with his team, never touching a trigger but always in the network, always watching the digital landscape they moved through. I learned their patterns, their communication rhythms, the way they breathed between firefights. And I learned something else. How fragile the whole operation was. One compromised radio frequency, one intercepted transmission, and everything collapsed. The call sign came during an operation outside Aden. Cashin's team was moving through a urban sector, hunting a high-value target, when their network lit up like a Christmas tree. Someone had cracked their encryption. Every word they spoke was being broadcast to hostiles who were already moving to intercept. I had maybe 90 seconds before his 6-man team walked into an ambush they'd never survive. I didn't ask permission. I ghost-routed their entire communication system through a series of proxy servers I'd been maintaining for exactly this kind of emergency. The hostiles heard static. Cashin's team heard my voice, calm and clear, giving them new coordinates, a clean extraction route, and the locations of 3 enemy positions they needed to avoid. They made it out. All 6. Not a scratch. Afterward, Cashin found me in the operations tent. He didn't say thank you. He just looked at me for a long moment and said, "You're Phantom 6 now. You saved 6 ghosts. That makes you the lead Phantom." It stuck. Word traveled through the special operations community the way these things do, quietly, but completely. I became the intelligence officer that SEAL teams requested by name. The one who could route communications through denied territory, who could find patterns in signal noise that saved lives. I wasn't on the posters. I wasn't in the recruiting videos. But I was in the after-action reports again and again, the unseen operator who made the impossible work. Cashin and I developed something during those years. Not friendship exactly, the operational tempo didn't allow for that, but a mutual respect that felt more solid than most friendships I'd seen. He understood what I did. He understood that my work required a different kind of courage than his. He never questioned it, never diminished it. We'd debrief operations in near silence sometimes, just nodding at each other, knowing we'd both done exactly what needed to be done. Somalia was harder. The operations were faster, meaner, with less margin for error. I spent weeks at a forward operating base, sleeping 4 hours a night, monitoring 6 different SEAL teams as they moved through Mogadishu hunting terror cells. My expertise in data fusion meant I could see patterns nobody else caught, the way certain cell phone towers lit up before attacks, the digital signatures of planning meetings, the ghost-like presence of commanders who thought they were invisible. I saved 3 teams in 2 months. Cashin's was one of them. He'd remember that later, when it mattered. When he should have remembered, but didn't. Off-duty was different. Away from the operations tent, I became someone else, or maybe just someone smaller. People saw a woman in her late 20s, quiet, composed, not particularly imposing. They'd make assumptions. I let them. There was power in being underestimated, in watching people reveal themselves because they thought you weren't worth hiding from. My mother taught me that too. She'd let doctors twice her age mansplain surgery to her, then save their patients when they botched the procedure. Let them talk, she'd say. Then do your job better than they do theirs. I applied for lieutenant commander at 31. The promotion board barely glanced at my record before approving it. By then, Phantom 6 wasn't just a call sign, it was a legend among special operations units. I'd ghost-routed communications across 3 continents, prevented countless compromised operations, and maintained a perfect record of mission success when I was attached to a team. The SEALs I worked with knew what I was worth. Or so I thought. The rotation stateside should have been easy. After 3 years of deployment cycles, I was assigned to Coronado for a training and planning rotation, developing new protocols for intelligence integration with SEAL teams. It was important work, strategic rather than tactical, and it meant I'd be working with many of the operators I'd supported overseas. I expected continuity, professional respect, the kind of relationship we'd built under fire. I should have known better. Context matters. Overseas, under operational pressure, competence is currency. Everyone knows what everyone else brings to the fight. But stateside, in the casual spaces between missions, old patterns reassert themselves. The bar becomes more important than the battlefield. The story you tell matters more than the work you did. I started noticing it in small ways. Comments during briefings that felt just slightly off. Intel's got it covered, said with a dismissive wave, as if intelligence work was somehow automatic, requiring no skill or judgment. Jokes about desk jockeys that landed just a little too hard. Nothing I could formally object to, but enough to create distance where there hadn't been any before. Cashin changed too. Not dramatically, he was still professional, still respectful in official settings. But the easy camaraderie we'd had overseas faded. He'd laugh along when others made jokes about intelligence work. He'd participate in conversations that treated my field as somehow less legitimate than direct action. Small betrayals, but they accumulated. Each one felt like watching someone forget who you were, one memory at a time. The real shift came with Logan Creed. Petty Officer Creed arrived stateside with the kind of energy that fills a room and demands attention, cocky, loud, perpetually performing confidence. He was good at his job, I could tell that much, but he was better at making sure everyone knew he was good at his job. Every story was about his shot, his call, his moment under pressure. The SEALs ate it up. There's something seductive about that kind of certainty, especially in a profession where doubt can kill you. Creed never seemed to doubt anything. He'd walk into briefings like he owned them, challenge senior officers just enough to seem bold but not insubordinate, and cultivate an aura of being the guy who got things done. I recognized the type immediately. Every military organization has them, operators who mistake aggression for confidence, who think leadership means being the loudest voice in the room. They're exhausting to work with but hard to confront because they're often good enough at their jobs that calling them out seems petty. Creed took an immediate dislike to me. I'm still not sure why. Maybe it was because I didn't react to his performances. Maybe it was because other officers respected me and he couldn't figure out why. Maybe he just needed someone to position himself against, and I was convenient. Whatever the reason, he started making comments. Intel's not real combat. Said casually during a planning session, as if it were objective fact rather than opinion. Phantom's just radio static. said while looking directly at me, waiting for a reaction I didn't give. Anyone can sit in a safe room and read reports. This one during a bar conversation, loud enough for half the table to hear. I didn't respond. Professionalism is its own kind of armor. If you don't react, people can't claim you're being difficult or emotional. But I felt each comment, stored each one away. Not with anger exactly. More like a scientist documenting data. This is what happens when respect becomes conditional. This is what it looks like when people forget what you've done for them. The others started joining in. Not everyone, Commander Chin, who ran intelligence oversight, stayed firmly in my corner. So did Chief Delane, my second-in-command in operations planning. But the SEAL operators I'd worked with overseas, the ones who'd relied on my ghost routing and data fusion to stay alive, started treating those contributions like ancient history. Overseas was overseas. Stateside was different. Cashin was the worst part. Not because he joined in, he didn't. Not really. But he didn't stop it either. He'd be sitting right there when Creed made some dismissive comment about intelligence work, and he'd just look away. Sometimes he'd smile, that small uncomfortable smile people use when they want to seem like they're part of the group but don't want to fully commit to the joke. Each time he did it, I felt something break. This was the man I'd saved. This was the officer who'd given me my call sign, who'd understood what I brought to the mission. Now he couldn't even make eye contact when someone mocked the work that had kept him alive. I should clarify something, I'm not easily hurt. 3 years of operational deployments teach you to develop thick skin. You learn to separate yourself from reactions, to observe your own emotions from a distance. It's necessary for survival. But this was different. This wasn't enemy combatants underestimating me. This was the people I'd bled for, metaphorically speaking. The people whose lives I'd saved, whose missions I'd made possible. They knew what I'd done. They just didn't care anymore, now that the context had changed. The comments escalated slowly. Phantom 6 became a punchline in their conversations. Someone would mess up something minor, spill a drink, miss a shot at the range, and someone else would say, "Better call Phantom 6 to fix it," and everyone would laugh. My call sign, the name I'd earned saving a 6-man team under fire, had become a joke about incompetence. I started avoiding casual gatherings. Why subject myself to it? I had work to do, new protocols to develop, new intelligence officers to train. I threw myself into that work with the same precision I'd brought to overseas operations. If they wanted to diminish what I'd done, fine. I'd just do more. I'd be so undeniably competent that the mockery would expose itself as ridiculous. But that's not how it works, is it? Competence doesn't protect you from contempt. Sometimes it makes it worse, because your existence becomes an implicit criticism of everyone who isn't performing at your level. They don't rise to meet you. They just find reasons why your competence doesn't count. I remember one specific moment. I was presenting a new intelligence integration protocol to a mixed group of officers, SEAL operators, intelligence personnel, command staff. It was solid work, the kind of systematic improvement that would save lives and improve operational success rates. I laid it out clearly, answered questions, and demonstrated how it would work in practice. Afterward, Creed asked, "But have you ever actually been in combat?" The room went quiet. Everyone knew the answer. Everyone knew that naval intelligence officers don't carry weapons in firefights. But everyone also knew I'd been in combat zones, under fire, doing work that made their operations possible. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "I've kept people alive in combat. That counts." The bar in Coronado was called The Anchor. Unimaginative name, but it was close to base and had reasonable beer, so it was always crowded on Friday nights. Wall-to-wall uniforms and the kind of loud conversation that comes from people who spend their days being disciplined and controlled, finally letting loose. I didn't usually go. Too much performance, not enough substance. But that particular Friday, Commander Chin had asked me to join her for a drink before she shipped out for a deployment. I wasn't going to say no to Chin. She lasted about an hour before her phone rang, something urgent, command needed her immediately. She apologized, threw cash on the bar, and disappeared into the night. That left me alone, in civilian clothes, with a half-finished beer and no particular desire to stay. I should have left then. That's the moment I replay sometimes. If I'd just finished my drink and gone home, everything would have stayed the same. But I needed to use the restroom, and then the bartender was friendly, and I ended up staying for one more drink. I was wearing jeans and a simple black shirt. Nothing military about it except the dog tags I always wore, habit from overseas where you never knew when you'd need identification. They were tucked under my shirt, invisible unless you looked closely. I wasn't trying to hide anything. I just wasn't advertising it either. Creed spotted me first. I was standing at the bar, waiting for a refill, when I heard his voice behind me. No way. Is that Phantom? I didn't turn around. Didn't need to. I knew that tone, the one that means someone's about to make you the center of attention you didn't ask for. He came around to face me, bringing half a dozen SEAL operators with him. Cashin was there too, hanging back slightly, but there. Creed had clearly been drinking for a while. His eyes were bright with alcohol and performance energy. He was playing to his audience. "You military?" he asked, too loud. People nearby turned to look. I could have said yes. Could have just answered the question and ended it. But something in his tone made me pause. He wasn't asking. He was challenging. Daring me to claim something he'd already decided I had no right to claim. So I didn't answer. Just looked at him steadily, the way my father taught me to stare down anything that wanted to intimidate you. That's when he saw the dog tags. My shirt had shifted slightly, and the chain was visible. His grin widened. "No way you're military." The others laughed. Not everyone, a couple of them looked uncomfortable. But enough. Enough that the mockery had social proof, enough that staying silent felt like agreement. I still didn't speak. I was running calculations in my head. What happened if I walked away? They'd take it as confirmation that they were right. What happened if I argued? They'd dismiss it as defensiveness. Either way, I lost. The game was rigged from the start. Creed leaned against the bar next to me, performing casual confidence. "Come on, sweetheart. What's your call sign? You've got tags, you must have a call sign." He said it like call signs were participation trophies, like everyone in the military got one regardless of what they'd actually done. The others were watching now. This was entertainment. The loud guy putting the quiet woman in her place. A familiar story, played out 1,000 times in 1,000 bars. I could see it in their faces. They'd already written the ending. I'd either get flustered and leave, or I'd claim something they could mock. Cashin was looking at the floor. That hurt worse than anything Creed was saying. The man I'd saved, the officer who'd given me the name Phantom 6, couldn't even meet my eyes while someone turned that name into a joke. I set my beer down carefully, turned just enough to face Creed directly. Met his eyes with the same calm I'd used while routing communications through hostile territory, the same steadiness I'd maintained while watching 6 men almost walk into an ambush that would have killed them all. And I said, very quietly, "Phantom 6. The words hung in the air for a moment. Creed's grin started to widen. He thought I was playing along, making up something to match his mockery. Then the name registered. Actually registered. I watched it happen in real time. His grin froze. His eyes widened slightly. He glanced back at the others. Cashin's head came up like he'd been shocked. His face went pale. Every SEAL operator in that circle suddenly looked like they'd been caught stealing. Because they had been, in a way. They'd been stealing my dignity, my reputation, my earned respect, and they'd thought it was free. Thought there were no consequences because I was just the quiet intelligence officer who never pushed back. "Wait," one of them said. "You're the Phantom 6? The actual Phantom 6? I didn't answer. Didn't need to. The truth was obvious now, written in Cashin's expression, in the sudden silence that spread through the group. They knew the stories. Everyone in special operations knew the stories. The intelligence officer who'd ghost-routed compromised communications and saved 6 SEALs in Yemen. The operator who'd spent 3 years preventing mission failures through pure signal work. The legend that got referenced in briefings as an example of intelligence excellence. They just hadn't connected that legend to the quiet woman they'd been mocking for months. Creed opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. We didn't know, you didn't ask," I said. Simple. Factual. Not angry, because anger would have given them something to react to, some way to reframe this as me being emotional or difficult. I pulled a 20 from my pocket, Left it on the bar for the bartender. Tipped him well, none of this was his fault. Then I walked out. Didn't rush, didn't storm. Just walked. Behind me, the silence held. No one called after me. No one tried to apologize. They were too busy realizing exactly what they'd done. Word traveled fast. By Monday morning, half of Naval Special Warfare Command knew what had happened at the anchor. The story got embellished in the retelling. I'd supposedly delivered some devastating comeback, humiliated Creed in front of everyone, made grown SEALs cry with my withering intelligence. None of that was true. All I'd done was state my call sign and leave. But the story took on a life of its own, the way these things do. I didn't feed it, didn't comment on it, just showed up to work and did my job with the same precision I'd always brought. But I noticed changes immediately. Operators I passed in hallways suddenly met my eyes, nodded with actual respect. Officers who'd been casually dismissive in meetings started listening when I spoke. My inbox filled with requests for consultation from teams I'd never worked with, all of them suddenly aware that Phantom 6 was available stateside. Commander Chin found me Tuesday morning. Heard you had an interesting Friday night. It was fine. Arden. She waited until I looked at her. You don't have to pretend it didn't matter. What they did was wrong. I know it was wrong. That's why I didn't explain myself until I had to. She studied me for a moment. Most people would be angrier. I shrugged. Anger's expensive. I'd rather just be clear about who I am and what I've done. If they choose not to know, that's their problem. Until it becomes your problem. It was always my problem, Chin. I just chose when to address it. She smiled slightly. You're scarier than half the operators I know. I'm not scary. I'm just done carrying other people's assumptions. Cashin showed up Wednesday. He found me in my office, knocked on the door frame even though the door was open. I looked up from the intelligence report I was reviewing, waited. Can I come in? It's your time. He closed the door behind him, sat without being invited. He looked tired. I need to apologize. All right. I mean it. What happened Friday? What's been happening for months? I should have shut it down. I should have reminded them who you are. They knew who I was, Cashin. They just didn't care. He flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? You were there every time Creed made a comment. You heard every joke, every dismissive remark. You knew what I'd done for you, for your team, and you looked away. So tell me, what part of that assessment is unfair? He didn't have an answer. To his credit, he didn't try to manufacture one. Just sat there, absorbing it. Finally he said, he didn't know who you were. He didn't ask. Would you have told him if he did? No. Because respect shouldn't be contingent on proof. I shouldn't have to recite my resume for people to treat me professionally. You're right. I know I am. That's not why you're here. He looked up. What? You're not here to apologize to me. You're here to apologize to yourself. You're here because you realized you failed your own standards, and that's harder to live with than failing mine. Silence. Long enough that I went back to my report, letting him sit with it. Eventually he said, how do I fix this? You don't. You just do better next time. That's it. That's everything. You think forgiveness is the point? It's not. The point is recognizing where you failed and choosing not to fail that way again. Whether I forgive you is irrelevant to that process. He stood slowly. You've changed. No. You're just seeing me clearly for the first time since we got stateside. After he left, I sat quietly for a few minutes. Not replaying the conversation, I don't waste time on that. Just acknowledging what had happened and what it meant. Cashin's respect mattered to me once. Now it was just data. Interesting, somewhat useful, but not essential to my sense of self. That was the real shift. Not the bar confrontation, not the spreading stories. This moment, alone in my office, realizing I no longer needed their validation to know my worth. Later that week, I received orders for a new assignment. Rear Admiral Hollis Vance wanted to see me personally. Vance ran Joint Special Operations Intelligence Oversight, effectively the top of my career ladder. I'd met her twice, both times in formal briefings where I'd presented intelligence assessments. She'd been professional, sharp, asking the kind of questions that demonstrated real understanding of the work. Her office was in the Pentagon, so I flew to DC on a Friday. She got straight to the point, Vance wasn't someone who wasted time on pleasantries. I'm creating a new fusion cell. Joint Operations Intelligence, integrating data from all service branches for Special Operations Task Forces. I want you to run it. I kept my face neutral. That's a significant expansion of my current role. It's a significant expansion of your current rank. You'd be promoted to commander, supervising a team of 20 intelligence officers and analysts, with direct reporting to me. When? Immediately. I need someone who understands both the technical intelligence work and the operational realities. Someone who can translate between worlds. Your record suggests you're uniquely qualified. My record? 3 years embedded with SEAL teams. Flawless operational security. Multiple documented saves using signal intelligence and data fusion. You've already been doing this work, Lieutenant Commander Vale. I'm just making it official and giving you resources. I studied her. You've heard about what happened at the Anchor. I've heard several versions. Most of them absurd. I don't care about bar fights. It wasn't a fight. Exactly. She leaned back. Here's what I care about. Can you run a high-pressure intelligence fusion cell supporting operators who will sometimes question your authority? Can you maintain operational security while managing personalities and egos? Can you be the adult in rooms full of people who think volume equals competence? Yes. Then we're done. Report here Monday. I'll have your team assignments ready. I stood. Admiral, why me specifically? Because I've read every after-action report from your deployments. Every single one. You know what they have in common? The missions you supported had 0 intelligence failures. 0. In 3 years of operations across 2 combat zones, you didn't miss a pattern, didn't miss out a communication, didn't overlook a threat. That's not luck, Commander. That's excellence. And excellence is what I need. I flew back to Coronado that night. Packed my office over the weekend. Told Commander Chin on Monday morning. They're promoting you, she said. Not a question. And reassigning me. DC starting next week. She smiled. Good. You've outgrown this place. I learned everything here. I know. That's how I know you've outgrown it. The new fusion cell was located in a nondescript building near the Pentagon. 20 intelligence officers and analysts, drawn from all service branches, all of them experienced in special operations support. My job was to integrate their work, coordinate with field operators, and provide real-time intelligence support for joint task forces. It was exactly the kind of challenge I'd been preparing for my entire career. Chief Marcus Delane transferred with me from Coronado. He'd been my second-in-command on several operations, and I trusted his judgment. On our first day, we spent 6 hours just mapping out communication protocols and data flow. Boring work, essential work. The kind of thing that prevents catastrophic failures later. By the end of the first week, we were operational. By the end of the first month, we'd supported 3 joint task forces and prevented 2 intelligence compromises that could have cost lives. The work was demanding, technically complex, and deeply satisfying. Then Logan Creed showed up. He knocked on my office door 4 weeks into the assignment. I looked up from the intelligence summary I was reviewing, recognized him immediately. He was in dress uniform, standing at attention. Petty Officer Creed. What are you doing here? I've been assigned as field liaison to your cell, ma'am. I report for duty Monday. I kept my expression neutral. You requested this assignment? No, ma'am. It was assigned through normal rotation. That was probably true. Field liaison positions rotated regularly, and SEAL operators often filled them. But the timing felt pointed. Someone in the assignment chain had decided to put Creed under my command. Maybe to test me. Maybe to test him. Sit down, Creed. He sat, still at attention. I let the silence stretch, watching him. He was uncomfortable but controlling it well. Good. Discomfort meant he was taking this seriously. Finally I said, "Are we going to have a problem?" "No, ma'am." "Because if we are, tell me now. I'll have you reassigned before Monday. No judgment, no questions. But if you stay, I expect the same professionalism I expect from everyone else on this team. Your past behavior is irrelevant to me as long as your future behavior meets standards. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." He hesitated. "I owe you an apology." "You've already apologized. Multiple times, I'm told." "I know. but I need to. He stopped, regrouped. What I did was wrong. Not just disrespectful, but ignorant. I made assumptions about your work, about your value, without bothering to learn anything about what you actually do. That's inexcusable in any context, but especially in a professional military environment where people's lives depend on mutual respect and trust. It was a good apology. Specific, acknowledging the actual problem, not making excuses. I nodded. Accepted. Now, let's get to work. I need you to review these field reports and flag any communication pattern anomalies. Bring me a summary by end of day. He took the files, stood. Ma'am? For what it's worth, I tell your story to every new operator I meet. What you did in Yemen. What you've done since. I make sure they understand that intelligence work is combat work, just a different kind. That's good, Creed. But don't tell them stories. Teach them standards. Stories fade. Standards last. He smiled slightly. Yes, ma'am. After he left, Chief Delane appeared in my doorway. You handled that well. It was a professional interaction. Nothing to handle. You're not even a little angry? What would that accomplish? He apologized. He's here to do a job. Either he does it well or he doesn't. My feelings about what happened months ago are irrelevant to his performance now. Delane shook his head. You're a better person than I am. I'm not better. I'm just practical. Holding grudges is expensive, Chief. It costs energy and attention I'd rather spend on the actual work. The truth was more complicated, but I wasn't going to explain it to Delane. Yes, what happened at the anchor still stung. Yes, I still remembered every dismissive comment, every moment when Cashin looked away. But anger was a tool, and like any tool, you had to know when to use it and when to set it aside. Right now, I needed Creed's operational experience more than I needed to punish him for past disrespect. That didn't mean I'd forgotten. It just meant I'd filed it away, categorized it, and moved on to more important things. The operation that changed everything came 6 weeks later. A joint task force was hunting a terror cell in the Syrian border region. Time-sensitive intelligence suggested an imminent attack on a civilian target, but the specifics were fragmentary. My team had 48 hours to piece together location, timing, and target identification from signal intercepts, satellite imagery, and human intelligence reports. We worked around the clock. Creed coordinated with field operators, feeding us real-time updates on terrain and local intelligence. Delane managed the data integration, making sure nothing fell through the cracks. I supervised the overall analysis, looking for patterns that would tell us where to focus our limited resources. 36 hours in, we had a location. 40 hours in, we had a time window. 44 hours in, we identified the target, a marketplace frequented by civilians, scheduled to be crowded at the exact moment the cell planned to strike. But we also identified something else. A drone strike team had misidentified the terror cell's location. They were planning to hit a building 200 meters from the actual target. If they launched, they'd kill civilians and miss the terrorists entirely. I had 10 minutes to stop it. I got on the command net, directly contacting the drone operation commander. This is Commander Vale, Fusion Cell Actual. Abort strike. I have updated targeting data. Negative, Commander. We have confirmed visual on target. Your visual is wrong. You're looking at a residential building. The actual cell is 200 meters south-southwest. I'm sending coordinates now. Commander, we've been tracking this location for 6 hours, then you've been tracking the wrong location for 6 hours. Abort now or you'll kill civilians and miss the actual target. Silence on the line. Then, sending this up the chain. There's no time. You have 90 seconds before your window closes. Either abort and retarget, or explain to command why you ignored direct intelligence from Fusion Cell. Your call. More silence. I waited, heart rate steady, watching the clock. This was the moment where competence either mattered or it didn't. Where my authority was either real or decorative. Finally, strike aborted. Retargeting for your coordinates. The strike went off 90 seconds later. Direct hit on the terror cell. 0 civilian casualties. Mission success. The task force commander sent formal commendation up the chain. Admiral Vance called me personally to acknowledge the save. But the real moment came in the operations center afterward. Creed found me reviewing the after-action data. That was impressive, ma'am. That was the job. No. He shook his head. That was more than the job. You put your reputation on the line, directly contradicted another command element, and demanded they trust your analysis over their visual confirmation. That takes, he searched for the word. Certainty, I said. It takes certainty that your work is correct. I was certain. How? Because I checked it 3 times before I made the call. Because my team verified every data point. Because I've been doing this long enough to know when analysis is solid and when it's not. I looked at him directly. This is what intelligence work is, Creed. It's not sitting in a safe room pushing paper. It's making calls that save lives when getting it wrong would cost them. He nodded slowly. I understand that now. I wish I'd understood it sooner. Then teach the next person sooner. Word spread about the Syria operation. Not because I promoted it, but because these things always spread in military circles. The intelligence officer who stopped a drone strike, prevented civilian casualties, and saved a mission through pure analytical certainty became another story in my file. Cashin called 2 weeks later. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Heard about Syria, he said. Hell of a call. It was the right call. Arden, I wanted you to know, the team's different now. The culture. We've been working on it. Making sure intelligence officers get the respect they deserve. That's good. You changed that. What happened at the anchor, what you've done since, it made people think differently about what intelligence work means. I considered that. I didn't change anything, Cashin. Consequences did. You all saw what happens when you dismiss competence. You saw the cost of those assumptions. That's what changed the culture, not me. Maybe. But I need to go. Good luck with your deployment. I hung up before he could respond. Not with anger. Just with finality. We'd said everything that needed saying months ago. The rest was just noise. 3 years passed. 3 years of running the fusion cell, supporting joint operations, training new intelligence officers in the art of precision analysis. I made commander at 35, ahead of schedule. Admiral Vance pushed for the promotion personally. Excellence should be rewarded, she said. And you've set a new standard. The work remained demanding but satisfying. My team developed protocols that became standard across joint operations. We maintained the perfect operational security record I'd started overseas, 0 intelligence failures, 0 compromised missions when we were attached. It wasn't luck. It was systematic excellence, the kind that comes from building the right culture and maintaining rigorous standards. Lieutenant Eva Corin joined my team in year 2. 26, fresh from her first deployment, sharp as broken glass. She reminded me of myself at that age, before I'd learned that competence sometimes needs protection, that being excellent isn't always enough. She came to my office one afternoon, frustrated. The operators don't listen to me. I give them solid intelligence, and they question every detail. It's like they think I'm making it up. I recognized that frustration. Lived it. What do you do when they question you? I explain. Show them the data. Walk them through the analysis. But it doesn't matter. They still act like I'm guessing. Stop explaining. She looked surprised. Ma'am? You don't explain competence, Corin. You demonstrate it. Once. If they question your analysis after you've proven it sound, that's their problem, not yours. Your job is to be right, not to convince people you're right. Let the results do that work. But what if they ignore my intelligence and the mission fails? Then it's on them, not you. Document everything, maintain your standards, and let consequences teach the lesson you can't. That's harder than explaining. It requires patience. But it's the only thing that actually changes behavior. She thought about that. Is that what you did? Eventually. I spent too long trying to prove myself to people who weren't interested in proof. When I stopped doing that, when I just maintained my standards and let results speak, that's when things changed. Doesn't it make you angry? That you had to prove yourself at all? Sometimes. But anger's expensive, and I'd rather spend my energy being excellent than being mad about having to be excellent. She smiled slightly. That's a very pragmatic approach to injustice. Injustice is real, Corin. But so is the mission. People's lives depend on us doing our jobs well regardless of whether we're getting the respect we deserve. So we do the job well. We maintain standards. And we trust that over time, competence wins. It doesn't always win quickly, and it doesn't always win fairly. But it wins. Eva nodded, filed that away. 6 months later, she made a call that saved a reconnaissance team from an ambush. The team commander who'd questioned her analysis sent formal commendation up the chain. She didn't gloat. Just did her job and moved on to the next mission. I watched her becoming the officer I'd been overseas, the one who knew her worth without needing constant validation. That's when I realized something. The bar confrontation, the months of dismissive comments, even Cashin's failure to defend me, all of that had taught me something valuable. Not about them. About me. About the difference between respect that's earned and respect that's required, and why only one of those actually matters. Admiral Vance called me into her office on a Tuesday morning. "I'm recommending you for promotion to captain." I kept my face neutral. "That's ahead of the normal timeline." "You've been ahead of the normal timeline your entire career, Commander. Captain's rank would put you in position to run intelligence operations for an entire theater. Multiple fusion cells, strategic oversight, direct advisory role to combatant commanders. It's where you should be." "When would this take effect?" 6 months, pending approval. But approval's a formality. Your record speaks for itself. After the meeting, I sat in my office for a while. Not celebrating, not planning. Just acknowledging the moment. Captain by 38. Running theater-level intelligence operations. Shaping how entire regions approach the integration of intelligence and operations. It was everything I'd worked for. And it had nothing to do with the confrontation at the anchor. That moment didn't make my career. My work made my career. The bar just made visible what had always been true. Chief Delane knocked on my doorframe. "Heard Vance called you in. Good news. Promotion recommendation. Captain." He grinned. "Congratulations, ma'am. Well deserved. It's just the next step. It's more than that. You know how many intelligence officers make captain before 40? You're setting a standard, ma'am. Phantom 6 isn't just a call sign anymore. It's what excellence looks like in this field." "Don't do that, Chief." "Do what?" "Make me a symbol. I'm just doing the work." "With respect, ma'am, you stopped being just doing the work a long time ago. Whether you want to be or not, you're what young officers point to when they're deciding if this career is worth it. Especially the women, especially the ones who get told they're not tough enough or real enough or whatever enough. You're proof that competence wins." I thought about Eva, about the other young officers I'd mentored over the years. About the ones who'd told me they'd joined intelligence because they'd heard about Phantom 6. Maybe Delane was right. Maybe it wasn't about me anymore. Maybe it had become bigger than one person's career, one person's confrontation with disrespect. That was uncomfortable. I'd never wanted to be a symbol. Symbols were fragile, subject to interpretation and myth-making. But maybe that discomfort didn't matter. Maybe what mattered was using whatever platform I'd built to make the path easier for whoever came next. "All right, Chief. I'll try to be worthy of that." "You already are, ma'am. You just don't see it because you're too busy actually being it." Later that week, I received a message through official channels. Logan Creed had been promoted to Chief Petty Officer. His promotion package included a letter of recommendation from his commanding officer, citing his improved understanding of joint operations and his effective mentoring of younger operators on the importance of intelligence work. At the bottom of the package was a personal note. "Ma'am, thank you for teaching me that respect isn't owed, it's earned, and excellence is the only real currency. I tell your story to every new operator, but more importantly, I teach them your standards. Fair wins." Creed, I filed it away. Not with pride, exactly. More with quiet satisfaction. He learned. Maybe not as quickly as he should have, maybe not without causing damage along the way. But he'd learned, and now he was teaching others. That was worth something. Cashin never reached out again after that phone call. I heard through channels that he'd made commander, that his team was performing well, that the culture around intelligence integration had genuinely improved. Good. That's what mattered. Not whether we were friends, not whether he'd fully atoned for looking away when he should have spoken up. Just whether the work got better, whether the next generation of intelligence officers faced less skepticism and more respect. The work got better. That was enough. 5 years after the bar confrontation, I stood at a Pentagon symposium addressing 200 intelligence officers from across the military. Captain Arden Vale now, running intelligence operations for Central Command, overseeing fusion cells supporting operations across the Middle East and Central Asia. The topic was intelligence operator integration. Appropriate, given my history. I kept my remarks direct. No war stories, no dramatic reveals. Just practical guidance on building trust, maintaining standards, and ensuring that intelligence work gets the respect it deserves without having to fight for it every single day. You will be underestimated, I told them. That's guaranteed. Intelligence work doesn't photograph well. It doesn't make for compelling stories around a bar. It happens in quiet rooms, in front of screens, in the invisible space between raw data and actionable intelligence. Most people won't see it. Some won't value it even when they do see it. I paused, looked across the room. Young faces, eager, uncertain. All of them trying to figure out how to be good at this work while navigating a culture that didn't always appreciate what they brought. Here's what I learned. You don't change minds with arguments. You change them with results. Be so consistently excellent that ignoring your work becomes impossible. Be so precise that questioning your analysis feels foolish. Build a record so solid that skepticism breaks against it. A hand went up. Young lieutenant, maybe 25. But what if they still don't respect the work? What if you do everything right and they still treat intelligence as secondary? Then you've done everything right and you let that be enough. You don't control other people's respect. You control your own standards. Maintain those standards regardless of whether anyone's watching, regardless of whether anyone appreciates them. Because people's lives depend on you being excellent whether or not you're getting credit for it. Another question, how do you deal with operators who dismiss your intelligence? Document everything. When your analysis is correct, and if you're good at this work, it will be correct most of the time, make sure that's documented. Not for revenge, not to prove anything. Just so the institutional record reflects what actually happened. Over time, that record becomes undeniable. It creates space for the next intelligence officer who faces the same skepticism. After the formal remarks, there was a reception. I usually avoided these, too much small talk, too much performance. But Admiral Vance had specifically asked me to attend, so I stayed. A young woman approached me, nervous but determined. Lieutenant Spars, probably 2 years into her career. Captain Vale? I'm Lieutenant Eva Corin. I served under you in the fusion cell 3 years ago. I remembered her immediately. Corin. Good to see you. How's your assignment? I'm running intelligence for a SEAL team out of Little Creek. It's challenging but good. I wanted to thank you. For what? For teaching me that I don't have to prove myself to everyone. Just to myself. That lesson changed everything for me. Before I could respond, another officer joined us. Commander's rank, SEAL Trident on his uniform. I didn't recognize him immediately, then did one of the operators who'd been at the anchor that night. He'd been in the background, hadn't participated in the mockery, but hadn't stopped it either. Captain Vale. Commander James Morrison. I was wondering if I could speak with you briefly. Go ahead. He glanced at Corin, who took the hint and stepped away. Then he said I was there. That night at the anchor. I didn't say anything when when the situation got out of hand. I've regretted that for 5 years. All right. I just wanted you to know that what you did, how you handled it, it changed how my team approaches intelligence work. We make sure our intelligence officers are in every planning session, that their input gets equal weight with operational considerations. We've built it into our culture. That's good. That's how it should be. It wouldn't be that way if you hadn't, he stopped. If you hadn't shown us the cost of treating intelligence work as secondary. I didn't show you anything, Commander. I just said my call sign. You figured out the rest yourselves. He smiled slightly. With respect, ma'am, you did more than that. You maintained your dignity when we'd given you every reason to lose it. You didn't yell, didn't demand respect, didn't make a scene. You just stated a fact and walked away. That's more powerful than anything else you could have done. Maybe he was right. I'd never thought of it that way, as a choice to maintain dignity rather than a simple statement of fact. But maybe that's what it had been. A refusal to let their disrespect reshape who I was. I appreciate you telling me that, Commander. After he left, I found a quiet corner and just watched the room. 200 intelligence officers, networking and learning and building the careers that would define the next generation of military intelligence work. How many of them would face the same skepticism I had? How many would be underestimated, dismissed, mocked? All of them, probably. That was the nature of the work. But maybe, if enough of us maintained our standards and let results speak for themselves, it would get easier. Not easy. This career would never be easy. But easier. More space for competence to be recognized without having to fight for every inch of respect. Admiral Vance appeared at my elbow. Good speech. It was adequate. It was more than adequate. You gave them something practical. Not inspiration, not platitudes. Just real guidance on how to navigate a system that doesn't always value what they do. Someone needed to say it. Someone who's lived it needed to say it. That's you. She paused. I'm retiring next year. There's going to be an opening for Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence. I'm recommending you. I kept my face neutral, but inside something shifted. Deputy Director. One of the highest intelligence positions in the Navy. Strategic oversight of all naval intelligence operations worldwide. That's a significant jump from Theater Intelligence Commander. You're ready for it. Your record proves it. And more importantly, you understand something most flag officers don't, that intelligence work is combat work. That the people doing it deserve the same respect, the same resources, the same career opportunities as anyone else in uniform. We need that perspective at the strategic level. I'd be honored to be considered. After she left, I stood there for a while longer, thinking about the path from Yemen to here. From the quiet intelligence officer embedded with SEAL teams to Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence. It had been a long road, full of moments where competence wasn't enough, where I'd had to prove not just that I could do the work, but that the work itself mattered. But I'd walked that road without compromising my standards, without becoming bitter, without letting other people's skepticism reshape my understanding of my own worth. That felt like winning. Not the dramatic, satisfying kind of winning that made for good stories. Just the quiet, steady kind that meant I'd built something lasting. The transition to Deputy Director took 8 months. 8 months of briefings, confirmations, planning sessions, and the kind of strategic thinking that operated at a completely different scale than tactical intelligence work. Instead of supporting individual missions, I was shaping intelligence policy for the entire Navy. Instead of routing communications for 6-man teams, I was determining how 50,000 intelligence personnel approached their work across every domain. It was exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure. My office was in the Pentagon, 3 floors from where I'd worked in the fusion cell. Different view, different responsibilities, but the same core mission, making sure the right information reached the right people at the right time so that operations succeeded and people stayed alive. One of my first initiatives as Deputy Director was establishing new standards for intelligence operator integration. Drawing on everything I'd learned over 15 years, I created protocols that made intelligence officers full partners in planning from the earliest stages. No more intelligence as an afterthought, no more treating analytical work as secondary to operational work. It faced resistance, predictably. Operational commanders who thought they knew better, who saw intelligence as support rather than essential capability. I pushed through anyway, using the same steady pressure I'd always applied. Not loud, not confrontational. Just persistent and backed by data showing that missions with integrated intelligence planning had significantly higher success rates. The protocols were adopted within a year. Not because I'd convinced everyone I was right, but because the results were undeniable. Commander Chin, now a captain herself running intelligence oversight for Pacific Fleet, sent me a message. Heard about your new integration protocols. About time someone made this official. The young officers thank you. I sent back, they did the work. I just made it policy. That was the truth. Every successful mission over the past 15 years, every life saved by good intelligence, every operator who learned to trust their intelligence officers, they'd built the case for these changes. I'd just been in the right position to make it official. Late one evening, working through budget proposals, my assistant knocked. "Ma'am? There's someone here to see you." Says it's personal. A Cashin Rourke. I almost said I was too busy. Then curiosity won. "Send him in." Cashin entered in civilian clothes, looking older than I remembered. More gray in his hair, lines around his eyes. He'd made captain too, I'd heard. Commanding officer of a SEAL team somewhere on the East Coast. "Arden. Thank you for seeing me. You have 10 minutes. I've got budget reviews to finish." He sat across from my desk. "I'm deploying next month. Afghanistan again. Before I left, I needed to tell you something." "All right. The team I'm commanding, they're good. Really good. And one of the reasons they're good is because they respect intelligence work in a way most SEAL teams didn't when we were coming up. They treat their intelligence officers as equal partners. They listen. They integrate intelligence into every planning phase. That's how it should be." "I know. And it's that way because of you. Because of what you taught me, what you forced me to learn, about what intelligence work really means. I studied him. You didn't come here to tell me your team is well trained." "No." He took a breath. "I came to tell you I was wrong. Not just wrong at the bar that night, though I was. Wrong before that. Wrong in how I let the culture shift stateside. Wrong in how I participated in diminishing your work. Wrong in not speaking up when I should have. I've spent 5 years trying to be better, trying to build teams that don't make those mistakes. But I needed you to know that I understand what I did, and I'm sorry." It was a better apology than the one he'd given years ago. More specific, more aware. But it still felt like something he needed more than I did. "I appreciate you saying that. That's all? Just, I appreciate it. What did you expect, Cashin? Absolution? Forgiveness? Those are for you to work through, not for me to grant. You failed your own standards. Whether I accept your apology doesn't change that. What changes it is you doing better going forward. Which you're already doing." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I wanted you to know. Now I know." He stood to leave, then turned back. "For what it's worth, you were the best intelligence officer I ever worked with. I should have told you that more often. I should have made sure everyone else knew it too. You're telling people now. That's what matters." After he left, I sat with the encounter for a few minutes. Not analyzing it, not trying to extract meaning. Just acknowledging it and moving on. Cashin's journey toward being a better officer was his own. I could witness it, but I couldn't carry it for him. My phone buzzed. Text from Eva Corin, who I'd kept in loose touch with, just got promoted to lieutenant commander. "Thank you for teaching me that excellence speaks for itself." I typed back, "Congratulations. Now teach the next person." That was the real legacy, I thought. Not the bar confrontation, not even the policy changes I was implementing. The legacy was every intelligence officer who learned they didn't need to prove themselves to people who weren't interested in proof. Every operator who learned to respect analytical work as combat work. Every team that integrated intelligence from the start instead of treating it as an afterthought. The Phantom 6 story would fade eventually. Stories always did. But the standards would remain. The expectations would remain. The culture that slowly, painfully shifted toward recognizing intelligence work as essential would remain. That was worth more than any apology, any belated recognition, any story told in bars about the intelligence officer who shut down a cocky SEAL with 2 words. I turned back to the budget proposals. There was work to do. 10 years after the anchor, I was giving the keynote address at the Naval Academy graduation ceremony. Rear Admiral Arden Vale by then, Director of Naval Intelligence, overseeing every intelligence operation the Navy conducted worldwide. It was a role I'd never imagined for myself, too visible, too political, too far from the actual work of analysis and operations. But Admiral Vance had been right. The role needed someone who understood intelligence work from the ground up, who could advocate for resources and respect at the strategic level. Someone who knew what it meant to do the work in the field, under pressure, when lives depended on precision. The graduating class sat before me in perfect white uniforms, young and eager and uncertain about the careers ahead of them. Some of them would choose intelligence. Most wouldn't. But all of them would work with intelligence officers at some point, and how they treated those officers would shape operations, culture, and, ultimately, lives. I'd written the speech carefully. Not about my career, not about Phantom 6. About something more fundamental. You're about to enter a profession that demands excellence, I told them. But here's what the textbooks don't tell you: excellence isn't always recognized. You will work with people who are extraordinary at their jobs, and you will be tempted to overlook them because their excellence is quiet. Because it doesn't announce itself. Because it's easier to respect the loud competence than the quiet kind. I paused, let that settle. Here's your obligation. See the quiet professionals. The intelligence officers who work through the night to ensure your mission has the right data. The logistics personnel who ensure supplies reach you when you need them. The technical specialists who maintain systems you depend on but never think about. These people save lives. They enable success. They're as essential as anyone carrying a weapon into combat. A young midshipman in the front row was taking notes. Good. You will face moments where you have to choose between easy respect and earned respect. Between acknowledging only the people who look like traditional warriors and acknowledging everyone who contributes to the mission. Choose earned respect. Every time. Because the military doesn't succeed through individual heroics. It succeeds through systematic excellence across every specialty. After the ceremony, during the reception, a young woman approached. Midshipman First Class, about to commission as an ensign. Intelligence Specialist, according to her academic insignia. Admiral Vale? I'm Emily Chin. I wanted to tell you I joined intelligence because of you. I'd heard that before, but it still felt strange. Tell me why. Because you proved it was possible to be excellent at this work and get the recognition you deserve. My mother is Commander Lyra Chin. She served with you early in your career. She always told me that if I wanted to do intelligence work, I should study how you did it, not just the technical skills, but the patience, the standards, the refusal to compromise competence for convenience. Commander Chin. I hadn't spoken with her in years, but I remembered her support during those early difficult months stateside. Your mother is an excellent officer. You're lucky to have her as a model. She says I'm lucky to have you both. She says you taught her that quiet confidence is more powerful than loud certainty. After Emily left, I found myself thinking about legacy again. Not the dramatic moments, not the confrontations or the vindications. But the quieter transfer of knowledge, the teaching of standards, the slow accumulation of cultural change that happened through thousands of small interactions over decades. That evening, back in my office, I received a message through official channels. Captain Logan Creed was retiring from the Navy. His farewell letter to his command included a paragraph about the importance of respecting intelligence work, about learning from mistakes, about the officer who'd taught him that competence matters more than ego. He didn't mention my name, but everyone who knew the story would know who he meant. I filed the message away. Creed had grown into a solid officer, by all accounts. His early arrogance had been tempered by experience and consequences into something more useful: confidence backed by competence, certainty earned through results. That was good. That was how it was supposed to work. Late that night, unable to sleep, I pulled up old files from Yemen. After-action reports from operations I'd supported 15 years ago. The mission where I'd earned the Phantom 6 call sign. I hadn't read these reports in years. Didn't need to. I remembered every detail. But reading them now, from the perspective of 2 decades of service, I saw something I'd missed at the time. How much of the success had been luck? How many things could have gone wrong? How narrow the margin was between saving 6 lives and losing them. I'd been good at my job, yes. Skilled, prepared, precise. But I'd also been fortunate. The right training, the right tools, the right circumstances all aligned at exactly the right moment. That's how most military success worked: competence meeting opportunity at the intersection of favorable conditions. The mythology that grew up around Phantom 6 had obscured that truth. Made it seem like individual excellence was sufficient, like being skilled enough meant you could overcome any obstacle. That wasn't true. Excellence was necessary, but not sufficient. You also needed support, resources, luck, timing. The real lesson wasn't that I'd been exceptional. The real lesson was that systems needed to be built so that capable people had the support and resources to succeed when opportunity presented itself. That was my job now, building those systems, ensuring that the next generation of intelligence officers had better tools, better training, better institutional support than I'd had. That was more important than any personal legacy. More important than the bar confrontation, the promotions, the recognition. Building systems that outlasted individual careers, that accumulated improvements across generations, that was the work that actually mattered. I closed the old files. Turned off my computer. Tomorrow there would be budget meetings, policy reviews, strategic planning sessions. The unglamorous work of institutional leadership. But it was work that made a difference, that created space for excellence to emerge and be recognized. That was enough. That had always been enough. 15 years after the anchor, I was preparing to retire. Vice Admiral Arden Vale, completing 30 years of service, ready to pass the responsibility of naval intelligence leadership to whoever came next. The retirement ceremony was scheduled for a Friday afternoon at the Naval Academy. Full honors, formal speeches, all the ceremonial elements that marked the end of a military career. I'd have preferred something quieter, but tradition demanded certain observances. The week before the ceremony, I was cleaning out my office when I found an old file buried in a drawer. Notes from my first deployment to Yemen. Handwritten observations about signal patterns, communication protocols, lessons learned about supporting special operations teams in hostile territory. Reading through them, I barely recognized the officer who'd written them. So young, so uncertain, so eager to prove herself. She hadn't yet learned that proving yourself was endless if you didn't know when to stop. Hadn't yet learned that respect earned through results was the only kind worth having. That young officer would never have imagined standing where I stood now. Deputy Director, then Vice Admiral. Shaping policy for thousands of intelligence professionals, influencing how the Navy approached intelligence work at the strategic level. The path from Yemen to here had been long and complicated, full of moments where competence wasn't enough and moments where it was everything. There was a knock on my door. "Come in." Captain Eva Corin entered. She'd grown into an exceptional officer, currently running intelligence operations for 7th Fleet, being groomed for flag rank herself someday. "Admiral. Wanted to check if you need any help with the ceremony preparations. It's all handled. But thank you." She sat down without being invited, which told me something was actually on her mind. "I wanted to ask you something personal. Off the record." "Go ahead. Was it worth it? The whole career. The fights for respect, the moments where you had to prove yourself over and over. The times when competence should have been enough but wasn't. Was it worth it?" I thought about that. Really thought about it, not just giving the easy answer. "Yes," I said finally. Not because I got recognition or achieved rank, but because the work mattered. Because I was part of something bigger than myself, the slow improvement of how we do intelligence work, how we integrate it into operations, how we respect the people who do it. My career contributed to that. Made it slightly easier for people like you to be taken seriously from the start instead of having to fight for every inch of respect. But you still had to fight. I did. And it was exhausting. And unfair. And necessary. Not because the fighting itself had value, but because it moved the system incrementally toward being better. Would I have preferred to just do the work without having to prove myself constantly? Of course. But that wasn't the reality I faced. So I worked with the reality I had and tried to change it for whoever came next. Eva nodded. "I've had it easier than you did. The culture's better now. Intelligence officers get integrated into planning from the start. Operators mostly respect our work." Mostly. Mostly, she agreed. There are still moments. Still assumptions. But nothing like what you faced early in your career. That's good. That's progress. It's not perfect, but perfect isn't the goal. Better is the goal. Incrementally better, with each generation facing fewer obstacles than the last. After she left, I continued clearing out my office. 30 years of files, commendations, after-action reports, policy documents. All of it would be archived, most of it forgotten. The important parts, the standards, the protocols, the cultural shifts, would remain embedded in how the Navy approached intelligence work. That was the real career. Not the moments of recognition or vindication, but the accumulated small improvements that reshaped an institution. The retirement ceremony itself was formal and brief. Admiral Johnson, current Chief of Naval Operations, gave remarks about my career. Highlighted the Yemen operation, the Syria intervention, the policy changes I'd implemented as director. Made it sound more heroic than it had felt at the time. But that was the nature of these ceremonies. They turned complex careers into simple narratives, messy reality into clean mythology. During the reception afterward, I was surrounded by well-wishers. Old colleagues, former team members, junior officers I'd mentored. They all had stories, moments where I'd helped them, taught them, or simply demonstrated that quiet competence had value. Logan Creed appeared near the end. Retired now, in his 50s, gray-haired and softer around the edges than the cocky petty officer I'd known. We hadn't spoken in years. Admiral. Wanted to pay my respects. Creed. Good to see you. I won't take much of your time. Just wanted you to know I've spent 15 years telling your story to young operators. Not the bar story. The real story. About an intelligence officer who saved lives through precision and patience, who built systems that made everyone better at their jobs, who proved that respect is earned through results. That's good, Creed. But stop telling stories. Teach standards. He smiled. Still the same advice. Because it's still the right advice. After he left, I found a quiet corner of the reception hall. Just watched the room. All these people whose careers I'd intersected with, whose work I'd supported or commanded or improved in some small way. The young officer who'd been mocked in a bar 30 years ago could never have imagined this moment. But that young officer also wouldn't have understood what I understood now. That careers aren't built on single moments of vindication or recognition. They're built on accumulated choices to maintain standards, to prioritize competence over ego, to improve systems rather than just succeeding within them. The bar confrontation was just one moment. Phantom 6 was just one call sign. What mattered was everything that came after, the decades of work, the incremental improvements, the cultural shifts that made the Navy slightly better at recognizing and utilizing intelligence excellence. That was the legacy. Not dramatic, not satisfying in the way stories are satisfying. Just real and lasting and quietly important. As I prepared to leave the ceremony, I spotted a young ensign standing off to the side, watching everything with wide eyes. Intelligence specialist, freshly commissioned. I recognized that look, the mixture of hope and uncertainty that comes with starting a military career. I walked over. Ensign. Enjoying the ceremony? Yes, ma'am. I mean, Admiral. It's inspiring. What's inspiring about it? She looked surprised by the question. Your career, Admiral. Everything you accomplished. It proves that intelligence work can lead to flag rank, that we can reach the highest levels. That's not what should inspire you. Ma'am, my rank is just outcome. What should inspire you is the work itself, the precision, the patience, the satisfaction of providing intelligence that saves lives and enables success. Do that work excellently, regardless of whether it leads to promotion or recognition. That's what matters. She nodded, processing. But didn't you have to fight for respect? Didn't you face people who dismissed intelligence work? Yes. And some days I'll still be angry about that, probably for the rest of my life. But that anger isn't useful. What's useful is this: you don't correct people with anger. You correct them with truth. And sometimes that truth is just demonstrating competence so consistently that ignoring it becomes impossible. Is that what you did? That's what I tried to do. Some days better than others. I left her with that. No dramatic final wisdom, no perfect encapsulation of 30 years of service. Just practical truth, the same kind I'd always tried to offer. Walking out of the Naval Academy that evening, I thought about the path from Annapolis to here. From the submarine officer's daughter who learned the value of quiet competence to the 3-star admiral who'd shaped intelligence policy for an entire service. It had been a good career. Not perfect. Full of moments where I'd been underestimated, dismissed, mocked. But also full of moments where I'd saved lives, improved systems, and helped build a culture that respected intelligence work. The young officer who'd said Phantom 6 in that bar 15 years ago had wanted vindication. Wanted those SEALs to know they'd been wrong about her, wanted to prove her worth in a way they couldn't ignore. The Admiral walking away from her career wanted something different. Just to know that the work had mattered. That the systems were slightly better, the culture slightly more respectful, the path slightly easier for whoever came next. And it was. Not perfect. But better. That was enough. That had always been enough. You don't correct people with anger. You correct them with truth. And sometimes that truth is just a name they never expected to hear, followed by 30 years of work that proved the name was earned. If you've ever had to hold your ground when someone underestimated you, drop a comment, and if this resonated, tap like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs the reminder. New stories on boundaries and quiet power every week. Questions for you. Have you ever been dismissed in public, then proved them wrong without raising your voice? What happened? When respect is withheld, do you explain or let results speak? What's your call sign moment, one fact about you that changes the room? If you were at that bar, what would you have said, or would you have just walked away? Where have you drawn a line lately that made everything clearer?